I couldn't sleep. It was 2 in the morning, 8 months after the stroke that had changed my life. I lay in my bed listening to the house settle, my mind fully awake, even though my body struggled with the simplest tasks. That's what people don't understand about strokes. Mine had damaged the speech centers in my brain, making it difficult to form words, to speak clearly. But my thoughts were unchanged. My intelligence was intact. My memory was perfect. I was trapped inside a body that wouldn't obey my commands, with a voice that couldn't express what my mind understood perfectly. From downstairs, I heard Angela's voice. Angela was my live-in caregiver, hired by my nephew Marcus to help me through recovery. She was 38, professional, patient with my struggles to communicate, or so I'd thought. Her voice was quiet, but I could hear her clearly through the old house's thin floors. She was on the phone, speaking in a tone I'd never heard before, not the gentle, encouraging voice she used with me. This was cold, calculating. "We moved another 40,000 today," she said. "The beauty is he can barely speak. He signs what I put in front of him because he can't argue, he can't question. He just nods and signs and trusts me completely." My heart began pounding. I tried to sit up to move closer to hear better, but my left side was still weak from the stroke. I managed to shift slightly, straining to catch every word. "Marcus deposited it into the joint account," Angela continued. "We're up to 240,000 now. Another few months and we'll have enough to disappear. You'll never even know what happened. By the time anyone figures it out, we'll be long gone." Marcus, my nephew, my sister's son, the boy I'd helped raise after his father died, the young man I'd mentored through college, the person I'd trusted to manage my affairs while I recovered. "I know, baby," Angela said, her voice softening. "I miss you too, but we have to be patient. George is the perfect mark. Stroke victim, no close family except you, 3 million in assets. We just need to keep playing our roles a little longer. He's helpless. He can't do anything even if he suspects something." The conversation continued, but my mind was reeling. Angela and Marcus were stealing from me. They were in a relationship I knew nothing about. They'd planned this, positioned themselves perfectly. Angela as the trusted caregiver with access to my daily life. Marcus as the family member with power of attorney. And me, the helpless stroke victim who couldn't speak well enough to accuse them. After Angela finished her call, I heard her footsteps on the stairs. I closed my eyes and regulated my breathing, pretending to be asleep. She opened my door quietly, checked on me the way she did several times each night, then left. I lay there in the darkness, my mind working through what I'd heard. $240,000 already stolen. Plans to take more. Plans to disappear. And they thought I was too damaged, too helpless to stop them. They were wrong about that. My name is George Richardson. I'm 74 years old. 8 months ago, I had a massive stroke while working in my home office. I was an architect for 50 years, designing commercial buildings across 3 states. I retired at 70, wealthy from a successful practice, with a beautiful home I'd designed myself and a portfolio worth $3.1 million. The stroke happened suddenly. One moment I was reviewing blueprints, the next I was on the floor, unable to move my left side, unable to speak clearly. My housekeeper found me and called emergency services. I spent 3 weeks in the hospital, another month in rehabilitation. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. I'd regained most of my mobility. My left side was weaker but functional. I could walk with a cane. I could use my left hand for support, though fine motor control was difficult. My mind was completely intact. Test after test confirmed my cognitive function was normal, but my speech was severely impaired. The stroke had damaged Broca's area, the part of the brain that controls speech production. I could understand everything. I could read, I could think, I could reason. But forming words, speaking clearly, it was a struggle. Sometimes words came out garbled. Sometimes they didn't come at all. It was frustrating beyond description, being trapped with thoughts I couldn't express. My nephew Marcus had been helpful during my hospitalization. He visited daily, dealt with doctors, handled paperwork. He suggested hiring a live-in caregiver for my recovery period. I'd nodded agreement, unable to explain that I wanted to try managing alone first, unable to articulate that I valued my independence. Marcus had found Angela through a caregiving agency. She'd moved in 6 months ago, taking over the guest room, managing my medications, helping with physical therapy, preparing meals. She'd been professional and kind, or I'd thought she had been. Now, lying in bed processing what I'd overheard, I understood. This had been planned from the beginning. Marcus positioning himself as the concerned nephew. Angela playing the devoted caregiver, both of them stealing from me while I struggled to recover. The next morning, Angela helped me dress and brought breakfast to the table. I watched her carefully now, looking for signs I'd missed before. She smiled at me warmly, asked how I'd slept, chatted about the day's schedule. The performance was perfect. "George, we need to review some bills today," she said, pulling out a folder. "Just routine stuff. I'll explain everything and you can sign where I've marked." She spread papers across the table. Bank transfers, bill payments, insurance documents. Everything looked official, professional. But now I knew better. Some of these were legitimate, others were theft disguised as normal transactions. I nodded slowly, pretending to review the papers the way I always did. My speech therapist had been teaching me alternative communication methods. I could write, though my handwriting was shaky. I could type on my laptop, slowly but accurately. But Angela didn't know I'd been practicing these skills. She thought I was dependent on verbal communication, and since verbal communication was difficult, she thought I was helpless. I signed the papers she indicated, not because I agreed, but because I needed time. Time to understand the full scope of what they were doing. Time to gather evidence. Time to plan. After Angela left to do errands, I went to my study. Moving was slow, my left leg dragging slightly, but I managed. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. My fingers moved awkwardly over the keys, but I could type, slowly, carefully, accurately. I logged into my bank account. I'd checked it periodically over the past months, but never with suspicion, never looking for irregularities. Now I examined every transaction for the past 6 months in detail. What I found made me sick. Dozens of wire transfers I didn't recognize, payments to companies I'd never heard of, cash withdrawals far larger than my normal spending. In 6 months, $783,000 had been moved out of my accounts. Not $240,000 like Angela had said on the phone. $783,000. They'd been stealing from me for months before Angela even moved in. This had been planned well before my stroke. I sat back in my chair, the enormity of the betrayal washing over me. Marcus had been stealing from me before I had the stroke. The stroke had just made it easier. And Angela wasn't just a caregiver he'd hired. She was his accomplice, probably his girlfriend, brought in to facilitate access to my daily life and my signature. I needed to document everything, but I had to be careful. If they realized I knew, they might escalate. They might hurt me. They might forge documents giving them complete control. I needed evidence that would hold up legally before I could act. I opened a new document on my laptop and began typing. The process was slow, my fingers clumsy, but I persisted. I documented the phone conversation I'd overheard word for word as I remembered it. I listed every suspicious transaction from my bank statements. I noted dates, amounts, recipient accounts. I created a folder on my laptop and titled it Evidence. I saved the document there and set the folder to sync with a cloud storage service Angela didn't know I used. If anything happened to my laptop, the evidence would still exist. Over the next week, I became a spy in my own home. I pretended to be the helpless stroke victim they expected. I signed papers Angela brought me without apparent question. I smiled and nodded when Marcus visited. But I was watching, listening, documenting. I discovered Angela went through my mail before giving it to me. She intercepted bank statements, investment reports, anything financial. She'd hand me a few bills, casual correspondence, but the important documents disappeared into her room. One afternoon while she was out shopping, I searched her room. It felt wrong, violating someone's privacy in my own home. But this person was stealing from me. I needed to know the full extent. In her closet, hidden in a box under clothes, I found copies of documents. Bank account statements showing the stolen money being deposited into an account listing both Marcus and Angela as joint holders. Forged powers of attorney giving them broader authority over my finances than they should have had. Notes in Angela's handwriting detailing which accounts they'd drained and which ones still had money to take. They'd planned to steal everything, not just $783,000, everything. The $3.1 million portfolio, the house worth $850,000, all of it. I photographed everything with my phone. My hands shook, making some images blurry, but I got clear shots of the most damning documents. Then I put everything back exactly as I'd found it. That evening, Marcus came for dinner. Angela had prepared a nice meal, playing the devoted caregiver. Marcus played the concerned nephew, asking about my therapy, my progress, my comfort. "Uncle George, you're looking better every day," Marcus said, smiling at me. "Angela's taking great care of you." I nodded, managing a garbled "thank you" that came out as "tank oo." Marcus glanced at Angela, and I saw something pass between them, a look of satisfaction, of contempt. They thought I was pathetic. They thought I was easy prey. "I wanted to talk to you about something," Marcus continued. "Your accounts are getting complicated to manage. All these different investments, different institutions. I think we should consolidate everything into one account. Make it simpler. I've drawn up the paperwork." He pulled out documents, pointing to signature lines. I looked at the papers, pretending to struggle with comprehension. In reality, I was reading every word carefully. This wasn't simplification. This was giving Marcus complete control of all my assets in one account he could drain entirely. I shook my head slowly. No good. "Uncle George, I know it seems like a lot, but trust me, this is better. Easier to manage, better for you." "No," I repeated, my voice barely working but my meaning clear. Marcus's expression tightened. Angela put a hand on his arm, a warning. They couldn't push too hard. Not yet, not while I could still resist. "Okay," Marcus said, forcing a smile. "We can talk about it later. No rush. Just think about it." But there was rush in his eyes, urgency. They needed to move faster. Maybe they'd heard something about investigations into caregiver fraud. Maybe they just wanted to finish the job and leave. Either way, time was running out. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about my sister, Marcus's mother. She'd died 10 years ago from cancer. I'd been with her at the end. Her last words to me were asking me to look after Marcus, to guide him, to be the father figure he'd lost. I'd tried. I'd paid for his college, helped him start his business, welcomed him into my life. And he'd repaid that by stealing from me, by conspiring to take everything I'd worked 50 years to build. The next morning, I made a decision. I needed help. Real help. But I couldn't speak well enough to explain the situation over the phone. I couldn't go to the police station without Angela noticing and asking questions. I needed someone who could come to me, who would understand, who wouldn't dismiss me as a confused stroke victim. I thought of Catherine Morrison, my attorney. I'd worked with her for 20 years. She'd handled my business contracts, my estate planning, my retirement documents. She knew me well. She'd know I wasn't confused. I waited until Angela left for her weekly errands, which gave me 2 hours alone. I sat at my laptop and composed an email. It took 30 minutes to type what would have taken 5 minutes to say, but I persisted. "Catherine, this is George Richardson. I need help urgently. My nephew Marcus and my caregiver Angela are stealing from me. They've taken over $780,000 from my accounts. They think my stroke has made me incompetent to stop them. My speech is impaired, but my mind is fine. I have evidence. I need you to come to my house when Angela is out. Tuesday at 2 p.m. she has a standing appointment. Please help me. I can't speak well, but I can write and type. Please don't call the house. Just come Tuesday. George." I read it 3 times, checking for clarity despite the simple sentences my typing speed forced. Then I hit send. Catherine replied within an hour. "George, I'm coming. Tuesday, 2 p.m. Don't do anything until then. Be safe. P." I felt relief flood through me. Help was coming. Someone who would believe me. Someone who could take action. I just needed to keep playing the helpless victim for 3 more days. 3 more days of pretending. 3 more days of watching them steal from me and smile while doing it. Tuesday morning, Angela was particularly cheerful. "George, I need to run some errands this afternoon. I'll be gone about 2 hours. Will you be okay?" I nodded. Fine. She'd been leaving me alone more frequently lately. Probably thought I was too impaired to do anything without supervision. She was wrong. At exactly 2 p.m., my doorbell rang. I made my way slowly to the door, opened it to find Catherine standing there with another woman. "George," Catherine said warmly, but with concern in her eyes, "this is Sarah Chen. She's a detective who specializes in elder fraud. I hope it's okay I brought her." I nodded vigorously and gestured them inside. Once we were seated in my living room, Catherine pulled out a notepad. "George, I got your email. Tell us everything. Write it down if that's easier than speaking." I'd prepared for this. I had my laptop ready. I opened the evidence folder and turned the screen toward them. Document after document, the typed record of Angela's phone conversation, screenshots of unauthorized transactions, photographs of the forged documents from Angela's room, everything I'd compiled over the past week. Catherine and Detective Chen read through everything in silence. When they finished, Detective Chen looked at me with something like respect. "Mr. Richardson, this is incredibly thorough documentation. Most stroke victims wouldn't have the capacity to gather evidence like this. You've made our job much easier." I typed slowly on my laptop. "They think I'm helpless. I let them think that. But my mind works fine. Just can't speak well." "That's actually an advantage," Detective Chen said. "They're confessing freely because they think you can't report them. We can use that. Mr. Richardson, are you willing to wear a wire? Record their conversations?" I typed, "Yes, anything to stop them." "Good. Here's what we're going to do." So far, George discovered his caregiver, Angela, and nephew Marcus had stolen $783,000 from his accounts, thinking his stroke made him helpless to stop them. Despite impaired speech, George's mind remained sharp. He secretly documented everything and contacted his attorney, Catherine Morrison, who arrived with Detective Sarah Chen. Now, with thorough evidence compiled and the authorities involved, George is preparing to wear a wire and gather the recorded confessions that will destroy both conspirators. Detective Chen pulled equipment from her bag, a small recording device no bigger than a button, a tiny microphone that could be hidden under clothing. "This is state-of-the-art," she explained, voice activated. 30-hour battery life. Everything records to a secure cloud server, so even if they find the device, we'll already have the recordings. Catherine leaned forward. "George, I need to make sure you understand the risks. If Angela or Marcus discovers you're recording them, they might become violent. They might try to force you to sign documents giving them complete control. Are you sure you want to do this?" I typed on my laptop. "I'm sure. They think I'm helpless. That's my advantage. They'll talk freely around me." "All right," Detective Chen said. "We'll wire you now." "Angela returns when?" I checked my watch and typed, "About 45 minutes." Detective Chen worked quickly, attaching the tiny microphone to the inside of my shirt collar, running the wire down to the recording device secured at my waist under my clothes. It was completely invisible. She tested it, speaking quietly while checking her laptop. "Perfect audio quality. George, just go about your normal routine. Let them talk. Don't try to prompt them or ask leading questions. Just be yourself." After they left through the back door, I sat in my chair and waited. My heart was racing, but my hands were steady. For 8 months, I'd been the helpless patient. Now I was fighting back, and it felt powerful. Angela returned right on schedule, arms full of grocery bags. "George, how are you doing? Did you have a nice quiet afternoon?" I nodded slowly. "Fine." She put away groceries, chatting about her errands, about dinner plans, about tomorrow's physical therapy appointment. Normal caregiver conversation. Then her phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and her expression changed. "I need to take this," she said, stepping into the hallway, but she didn't go far enough. I could hear every word. "Hey, baby," she said quietly. "Marcus?" "Yeah, he's fine. Docile as always. Did you set up the new account?" "Good. I'll get him to sign the transfer authorization tomorrow. We're so close, Marcus. Another month and we'll have everything." She talked for 5 more minutes, discussing logistics, discussing their plans to leave the country once they'd drained my accounts completely. The recorder captured every word. That evening, Marcus came for dinner as he did twice a week. Angela had prepared a nice meal. They sat with me at the table, talking around me like I wasn't fully present. Uncle George has been doing so well with his therapy, Angela said to Marcus. Haven't you, George? I nodded and managed, better. That's great, Uncle George, Marcus said, but his eyes were cold, calculating. Angela and I were talking. We think it's time to discuss long-term care planning. You're doing well now, but strokes can be unpredictable. We should make sure everything is in order. In case you have another episode. He was threatening me. Subtly, but clearly. Another episode. They could arrange that. Overdose my medication. Create conditions that would trigger another stroke. I felt fear spike through me, but I kept my expression neutral. I've drawn up some documents, Marcus continued, pulling papers from his briefcase. This one gives Angela and me joint authority over all your medical decisions. This one consolidates your accounts like we discussed. And this one establishes a trust with me as the trustee. It's all for your protection, Uncle George. We just want to make sure you're taken care of. I looked at the papers, pretending to struggle with comprehension. In reality, I was reading every word. These documents would give them complete control. Medical decisions meant they could put me in a facility against my will. Account consolidation meant they could drain everything at once. The trust meant even if I died, they'd control the estate. I shook my head. No, not ready. Marcus's jaw tightened. Uncle George, I really think we should do this now, while you're still capable of signing. If you wait, you might have another stroke, and then we'd have to go through guardianship proceedings. That's complicated and expensive. This is so much simpler. No, I repeated more firmly. My speech was garbled, but my meaning was clear. Angela put a hand on Marcus's arm. It's okay. George needs time to think about it. We can talk about it again in a few days, right, George? I nodded, relieved for the temporary reprieve. But Marcus looked frustrated, angry even. They were running out of patience. After Marcus left, Angela cleaned up dinner. I went to my study, sat at my laptop, and typed notes about the conversation. The threats, the pressure, the documents designed to give them total control. All of it was recorded on the wire, but I wanted my own written record too. Over the next week, the recorder captured hours of conversations. Angela on the phone with Marcus multiple times a day. Their discussions about which accounts to drain next, their plans to forge a new will leaving everything to Marcus, their calculations about how much they could steal before anyone noticed. They also talked about their relationship. They'd been together for 3 years, it turned out. The entire time, Marcus had been volunteering to help me with estate planning and financial management after I retired. He'd been setting this up for years, waiting for the right opportunity. My stroke had been that opportunity. One afternoon, Angela had a visitor, a man I'd never seen before. She introduced him as her brother, but I heard them talking later when they thought I was napping. He wasn't her brother. He was a forger, someone who specialized in creating fake documents. Can you match this signature exactly? Angela asked, showing him papers I'd signed months ago. Easy, the man said. How many documents do you need? At least a dozen. Bank transfers, real estate deeds, new will, revised trust documents. We need to move everything into accounts we control before anyone questions anything. That'll cost you. We have the money. Or we will soon. The recorder captured everything. Detective Chen visited twice more while Angela was out, collecting the recordings, reviewing the evidence. George, this is phenomenal, she said the second time. We have enough to charge them with fraud, conspiracy, forgery, elder abuse, probably attempted murder given their discussions about triggering another stroke. I typed, when will you arrest them? Soon. We want to catch them in the act of one more theft, something big, undeniable. Do you think they'll try to get you to sign something major soon? I typed, Marcus is getting impatient. He'll push hard this week. Good. Let him push. Let them think they're winning. When they make their move, we'll be ready. The confrontation came 3 days later. Marcus arrived unannounced in the morning, which was unusual. He had another man with him, someone he introduced as a notary public. Angela was there too, looking tense. Uncle George, we need to take care of some urgent business, Marcus said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Your property taxes are due. There's a penalty if we don't pay by tomorrow. But the payment is substantial, and we need to transfer money from your investment accounts. I need you to sign these authorization forms. He spread papers across the table. I looked at them, reading carefully despite pretending to struggle. These weren't property tax forms. These were authorization to transfer $850,000, essentially everything left in my liquid accounts, into the account Marcus and Angela controlled jointly. This was it, the final theft. They were going to take everything in one move. I picked up the pen, my hand shaking slightly from the stroke effects. I touched the pen to the paper. Marcus leaned forward, eager. Angela watched intently. The notary stood ready with his stamp. Then I set the pen down and shook my head. No. Uncle George, you have to sign this. The penalties will be enormous. No, I repeated. Marcus's face flushed red. You don't understand. You don't have a choice. You're not capable of managing this yourself. That's why you gave me power of attorney. I typed slowly on my laptop, which was on the table. I gave you limited POA, not this. Marcus stared at the screen, realizing I'd communicated more clearly than I had in months, realizing I'd been capable of this all along. You've been playing us, he said quietly, his voice dangerous. You've been pretending to be more impaired than you are. Angela grabbed his arm. Marcus, calm down. We can talk about this. But Marcus was beyond calm. He grabbed my wrist, trying to force my hand toward the paper. Sign it, old man. Sign it now, or I'll make you regret it. That's when I did something they didn't expect. I stood up, steadier than they'd seen me move in months, and backed away from the table. Then I spoke clearly, working hard to enunciate each word despite the stroke damage. You're stealing. I know. Everything. Marcus froze. Angela went pale. The notary looked confused. What are you talking about? Marcus tried, but his voice lacked conviction. I pulled open my shirt, revealing the recording device. Police, listening, everything recorded. The room erupted. Marcus lunged at me, trying to grab the device. Angela shouted something. The notary bolted for the door, and I pressed the panic button Detective Chen had given me for exactly this scenario. Within 90 seconds, police officers crashed through my front door. Detective Chen was with them, gun drawn, shouting commands. Marcus was face down on the floor in handcuffs before he could reach me. Angela was cornered in the kitchen, crying, her hands up. George, are you okay? Detective Chen asked, checking me over. I nodded, my heart pounding, my legs shaking from the exertion of standing and moving. But I was okay, more than okay. I'd done it. Marcus Richardson, Angela Phelps. You're both under arrest for fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, forgery, and attempted extortion. Detective Chen recited their rights as other officers secured the scene. The notary, it turned out, was also arrested. He was a convicted felon who'd done time for forgery and was violating his parole by continuing the same crimes. He started talking immediately, confessing that Marcus and Angela had hired him to create fake documents for months, that this wasn't his first job for them. In the police station later that day, I gave my statement. With Catherine beside me, I typed everything out on a laptop the police provided, the entire conspiracy, the stolen money, the forged documents, the threats, the plans to take everything and disappear. Detective Chen interviewed Angela separately. According to Chen, Angela broke within an hour, confessing to everything and blaming Marcus for masterminding the scheme. She claimed she'd just been following his instructions, that she'd loved him, and he'd manipulated her. Marcus, on the other hand, refused to talk. He sat in the interrogation room with his attorney and said nothing, thinking somehow he could still get out of this. But the evidence was overwhelming. The recordings of their conversations captured over weeks, the forged documents, the financial records showing unauthorized transfers, the forger's testimony, my own detailed documentation. They had no defense. Catherine drove me home that evening. My house felt different now, safer, like I'd reclaimed it from invaders. George, you did something extraordinary today, Catherine said. Most people in your situation would have been victimized completely. They'd never have known what happened. But you fought back. You used your intelligence, your patience, your skills. You beat them. I typed on my phone. They thought my stroke made me helpless, but it just made me quiet enough to listen and document everything. The preliminary hearing is in 2 weeks. The prosecutor's confident about conviction. With the recordings and the forensic evidence, this is an open and shut case. You're going to get your money back, George, all of it, plus damages. That night, alone in my house for the first time in 6 months without Angela there, I sat in my study and allowed myself to feel the fear I'd suppressed, the anger at the betrayal, the grief over my nephew's transformation from family to predator. But I also felt pride. I'd survived a stroke that could have killed me. I'd recovered enough to function independently despite significant impairments, and I'd outsmarted 2 people who'd thought I was an easy target. My sister's face came to mind. Her last request that I look after Marcus. I'd tried. I'd given him opportunities, education, trust. But he'd chosen this path himself. I hadn't failed her. Marcus had. Over the next weeks, the investigation expanded. Detective Chen called with updates. They'd found evidence that Marcus and Angela had targeted another elderly stroke victim before me. That victim had died under suspicious circumstances shortly after signing over his estate. Now that case was being reopened as a potential homicide. George, you may have saved other lives by stopping them, Detective Chen said. If they'd succeeded with you, they would have moved on to the next victim. This was their business model. The preliminary hearing arrived. I attended with Catherine, watching as Marcus and Angela were formally charged. The evidence was presented. The judge reviewed it and ruled there was overwhelming probable cause to proceed to trial. Marcus still showed no emotion. Angela sobbed throughout. Both were denied bail as flight risks given their recorded plans to leave the country. The trial was scheduled for 3 months later. In the meantime, I focused on continuing my recovery. My speech therapy intensified. I was determined to testify clearly, to tell my story in my own voice despite the stroke damage. My speech therapist, Dr. Linda Park, was amazed by my progress. George, your motivation is extraordinary. Most patients plateau after 6 months. You're still improving dramatically. Want to testify? I managed, the words coming easier than they had weeks ago. Need to speak clearly. You will, she assured me. By trial time, you'll be understandable to everyone. Keep practicing. I did. Every day, hours of practice, reading aloud, repeating phrases, working my damaged brain pathways, forcing them to rebuild connections. It was exhausting, frustrating work, but I persisted. 3 months later, I walked into the courtroom without my cane. My left side was still weaker, but functional. And when the prosecutor called me to testify, I walked to the witness stand steadily, sat down, and looked directly at Marcus and Angela. The prosecutor asked me to state my name for the record. I spoke slowly but clearly. My name is George Richardson. So far, George wore a wire and recorded weeks of conversations proving his caregiver, Angela, and nephew Marcus were systematically stealing from him. When they tried to force him to sign documents transferring his final $850,000, George revealed the recording device and police arrested both conspirators. The investigation also uncovered a previous stroke victim who died suspiciously after signing over his estate. Now, after 3 months of intensive speech therapy, George is testifying at trial with dramatically improved speech, ready to tell his story and ensure both predators face full consequences. The prosecutor, Daniel Warren, was in his 50s, experienced and direct. He'd prepared me thoroughly for this testimony. Now he asked his first question. Mr. Richardson, can you tell the jury about the stroke you suffered 8 months ago? I took a breath and spoke slowly but clearly. I had a massive stroke while working in my home office. It damaged the speech center of my brain. I could not speak well for months, but my mind was not damaged. I could think clearly. I could understand everything. I just could not express myself verbally. My words were measured, some syllables, still slightly slurred, but understandable. The jury leaned forward, listening intently. When you say your mind was not damaged, what do you mean? I mean my intelligence was intact. My memory was perfect. My reasoning ability was unchanged. The stroke affected my speech production, not my cognitive function. Doctors tested me extensively. Every test showed normal brain function, except for speech. So when the defendants assumed you were incompetent because you couldn't speak clearly, they were wrong. Completely wrong. I understood everything happening around me. I I just could not tell anyone about it easily. Daniel led me through the timeline, hiring Angela as a caregiver, giving Marcus limited power of attorney to handle routine bills, trusting both of them completely because I had no reason not to. When did you first suspect something was wrong? I could not sleep one night. I heard Angela on the phone. She was talking to someone, saying they had moved $40,000. She said I would never notice because I could barely speak. She said I was helpless. What did you do after hearing this? I began investigating. I checked my bank accounts carefully. I found $783,000 had been stolen over 6 months. I documented everything. I searched Angela's room and found forged documents. I took photographs. I contacted my attorney, Catherine Morrison. I agreed to wear a recording device to gather evidence. Why didn't you just report the theft immediately? Because I had no proof yet. Just what I had overheard. I knew they would claim I was confused, that my stroke had affected my judgment. I needed solid evidence, recordings, documents, proof that could not be disputed. Daniel played portions of the recordings for the jury. Angela's phone conversations discussing the theft. Marcus and Angela together planning which accounts to drain next. Their discussion about forging my signature. Their plans to leave the country. The conversation with the forger ordering fake documents. The jury's expressions ranged from shock to disgust. Mr. Richardson, at any point did the defendants threaten you? Yes, Marcus said I should sign documents quickly before I had another stroke. He implied another stroke could happen if I did not cooperate. I understood this as a threat. They could overdose my medication. They could create conditions that would trigger another stroke. Were you afraid? Yes, very afraid. But I was also determined. They assumed my stroke made me weak and helpless. I decided to use that assumption against them. The defense attorney, Gerald Hoffman, cross-examined me aggressively. He tried to suggest my memory was unreliable. He implied my stroke had affected my judgment. He questioned whether I'd really understood what I was signing over the months. But I was prepared. For every question, I had a clear answer. When he suggested I might be confused about dates, I recited specific conversations with exact timestamps from my documentation. When he implied my cognitive function was impaired, I explained in detail the neurological differences between speech impairment and cognitive impairment. Mr. Richardson, isn't it true that you needed help with basic daily activities, that you couldn't manage your own affairs? I needed help with some physical tasks because of left side weakness, but I could read, write, type, think, analyze. I was physically impaired, not mentally incompetent. There is a significant difference. Yet you signed documents you now claim were fraudulent. I signed some legitimate bills and routine paperwork mixed in with fraudulent documents. Angela presented everything together. I trusted her. When I became suspicious, I stopped signing anything significant. That is when they became aggressive and tried to force my signature. The testimony lasted all day. By the end, I was exhausted but satisfied. I'd told my story clearly. The jury had heard everything. Angela's defense tried to paint her as a victim of Marcus's manipulation. Her attorney argued she was just following instructions, that she'd believed everything was legitimate, that Marcus had deceived her too. But the prosecution played recordings of Angela alone on the phone, discussing the theft enthusiastically, laughing about how easy it was to fool me, planning what she'd buy with the stolen money. The victim narrative collapsed. Marcus's defense was that he'd been trying to protect my assets from bad investment decisions, that I'd approved everything, that the signatures weren't forged, but I'd simply forgotten signing them. The handwriting expert destroyed that defense. She showed side-by-side comparisons of my real signatures and the forged ones, pointing out the differences in pressure, flow, and letter formation. These signatures were traced and slightly altered, she testified. They were not written naturally by Mr. Richardson. The forger, testifying for a reduced sentence, confirmed he'd created dozens of fake documents for Marcus and Angela. He identified specific forgeries, explaining the techniques used. His testimony was devastating, but the most damning evidence was the recording of the final confrontation. The jury heard Marcus trying to force me to sign the document. They heard him grab my wrist. They heard the aggression in his voice. They heard me reveal the wire and his panic when he realized I'd been recording everything. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the forewoman read the verdict. Guilty on all counts for both defendants. 23 charges total: fraud, conspiracy, elder abuse, forgery, attempted extortion. Marcus showed no emotion. Angela sobbed. I felt relief wash through me. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. In the meantime, Detective Chen called with news about the previous victim, a man named Harold Chen, no relation to the detective. George, we've reopened Harold's death investigation. He was 76 when he died, 3 years ago. Stroke victim, just like you. Angela was his caregiver. Marcus was named in his will. Harold died from what appeared to be another stroke 6 months after signing over his estate to Marcus. But now we're having his body exhumed. We're testing for substances that could have triggered the stroke. Do you think they murdered him? I think it's highly likely. The pattern is too similar. Stroke victim, caregiver named Angela, though she used a different last name then. Nephew or family member positioned to inherit. Sudden death shortly after estate transfer. We're building a murder case. Harold Chen's daughter, Michelle, attended our sentencing hearing. She approached me beforehand, tears in her eyes. Mr. Richardson, thank you. Thank you for stopping them. My father's death never felt right. The timing, the circumstances. But I had no proof. I couldn't fight it. You gave us the evidence to reopen his case. You may have proven my father was murdered. That means everything to me. I am sorry for your loss, I said, my speech still careful but clear. Your father deserved better. We both did. But you survived and fought back. You're an inspiration, Mr. Richardson. The sentencing hearing was packed. Media had covered the trial extensively. Elder abuse and exploitation of vulnerable stroke victims had become a national conversation. Our case was at the center of it. Judge Patricia Williams presided. She'd observed the entire trial with an increasingly grim expression. Now she looked at Marcus and Angela with visible contempt. I have been a judge for 31 years, Judge Williams began. I have seen many terrible crimes, but cases like this disturb me deeply. Mr. Richardson suffered a catastrophic medical event that impaired his ability to communicate. Instead of helping him, instead of honoring the trust he placed in you, you exploited his vulnerability. You stole nearly $800,000. You forged documents. You planned to steal everything he had worked 50 years to accumulate. And the evidence suggests you may have done this before, possibly committing murder in the process. She reviewed the sentencing guidelines, the prosecution's recommendations, the defense pleas for leniency. Marcus Richardson, you betrayed your uncle, a man who helped raise you, who paid for your education, who trusted you completely. You used that trust to steal from him. You positioned yourself as his protector while planning to take everything. You threatened him implicitly with medical harm if he didn't comply. Your actions were calculated, deliberate, and cruel. I am sentencing you to 35 years in federal prison. You will also pay full restitution of $783,000 plus penalties and interest, totaling approximately $1.1 million. Marcus was 41. He wouldn't be eligible for parole until he was 76, older than I was now. Angela Phelps, you chose to enter the caregiving profession, a profession that requires trust, compassion, and integrity. You violated every principle of that profession. You took advantage of a vulnerable stroke victim, stealing from him while pretending to care for him. You forged documents, you lied, you conspired. You are sentenced to 28 years in federal prison and full joint restitution with Mr. Richardson. Angela collapsed in her chair, sobbing. 28 years. She was 38. She'd be 66 when released. And let me be clear, Judge Williams continued, if the investigation into Harold Chen's death results in murder charges, both of you will face additional prosecution. These sentences may be only the beginning of your punishment. After sentencing, I spoke to the media gathered outside the courthouse. Catherine had prepared a statement, but I wanted to speak in my own words, using my own voice. My name is George Richardson. I am 75 years old. 14 months ago, I had a stroke that damaged my ability to speak. My nephew and my caregiver assumed this meant I was helpless. They assumed I could not think clearly, could not understand what was happening, could not fight back. They were wrong. I paused, making sure my words were clear. The cameras focused on me intently. Having a stroke does not make you incompetent. Being unable to speak clearly does not mean your mind is damaged. I understood everything that was happening to me. I documented it, I gathered evidence, I worked with law enforcement, and I stopped them. "What message do you have for other stroke survivors?" a reporter asked. "Do not let anyone make you feel helpless. Your voice is not the only way to communicate. You can write, you can type, you can use technology. Your intelligence and your rights do not disappear because of physical impairment. If someone is exploiting you, fight back. Document everything. Find people who will listen. Do not accept being victimized." What about family members of stroke survivors? Watch for warning signs. Caregivers or family members who isolate the survivor, who control all finances without transparency, who pressure for signatures on documents, who become defensive when questioned. Elder abuse is common, and stroke victims are particularly vulnerable. Protect your loved ones. Over the next months, I became an advocate. I spoke at hospitals, rehabilitation centers, caregiver conferences. I told my story. I explained the warning signs. I emphasized that stroke survivors retain their mental capacity even when physical abilities are impaired. I worked with victim advocacy groups to create better protections for vulnerable adults. I pushed for legislation requiring independent verification of major financial transactions involving impaired individuals. I testified before state legislative committees about elder abuse. Michelle Chen and I became friends. The exhumation of her father's body revealed elevated levels of medication that could have triggered his fatal stroke. Combined with the evidence from my case, prosecutors filed murder charges against both Marcus and Angela. They would face trial for Harold's death within the year. "You gave my father justice," Michelle said when we met for coffee one afternoon. "For 3 years, I thought I'd failed him. I knew something was wrong, but couldn't prove it. You proved it." "I just refused to be silent," I replied. My speech was nearly normal now, 14 months of intensive therapy paying off. Even when I could not speak, I would not be silent. My physical recovery continued too. I no longer used a cane. My left side was weaker but functional. I'd returned to my architecture practice on a consulting basis, reviewing designs, mentoring young architects. My mind had never stopped working, and now my body was catching up. I hired a new caregiver, but this time I did extensive background checks. I maintained complete transparency in finances. I kept detailed records. I'd learned my lessons. The house felt like mine again. I'd had it deep cleaned, removing every trace of Angela's presence. I'd changed locks, updated security systems, reclaimed my space. This was my home, designed by my own hand, and no one would take it from me again. Catherine helped me recover most of my stolen money through the restitution process. Marcus and Angela's assets were seized and liquidated. I received $740,000 back immediately. The remaining amount would be paid through their prison wages over many years, but the bulk of my loss was recovered. I donated a portion of the recovered money to organizations supporting stroke survivors and preventing elder abuse. It felt right to take something terrible and create something positive from it. My sister's memory haunted me less now. I'd kept my promise to watch over Marcus as best I could, but he'd chosen his path. I couldn't have prevented it. She would have understood. I started writing a book about my experience. It was slow work, even with my improved speech and dexterity. But I persisted. The book would be titled, "The Silent Witness, A Stroke Survivor's Fight Against Elder Abuse." I wanted other people in my situation to know they weren't helpless. That fighting back was possible. Harold Chen's murder trial began 8 months after the sentencing in my case. I attended every day, sitting beside Michelle. The prosecution built a compelling case. The medication levels in Harold's body, the suspicious timing of his death, the financial motive, Angela and Marcus's pattern of targeting stroke victims. The jury convicted both of them of first-degree murder. Additional sentences of life without parole for Marcus, life without parole for Angela. The judge ordered the sentences to run consecutively with their previous sentences. They would die in prison. Michelle hugged me after the verdict. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for fighting back, for giving us closure, for making sure they can never hurt anyone else." Your father would be proud of you, I said. You never gave up on finding the truth. That was 2 years ago. Today, I'm 77 years old. I live independently in the house I designed. I consult on architecture projects. I speak publicly about stroke recovery and elder abuse prevention. I've testified before Congress about the need for stronger protections for vulnerable adults. My speech is nearly normal now. Occasionally, words still come out wrong, especially when I'm tired. But I can communicate effectively. I can tell my story. I can advocate for others. People often ask if I'm bitter about what happened, about Marcus's betrayal, about the 8 months I spent being victimized while recovering from a catastrophic stroke. The answer is complicated. I'm angry, yes. The betrayal cut deep. But I'm also grateful. Grateful that I survived the stroke. Grateful that my mind remained sharp even when my voice didn't work. Grateful for Catherine and Detective Chen and Dr. Park and everyone who helped me fight back. Most of all, I'm proud. Proud that I didn't give up. Proud that I used my intelligence and determination to protect myself. Proud that I stopped 2 predators from victimizing others. Having a stroke changed my life. But it didn't diminish me. It didn't make me weak or helpless or incompetent. It made me slower. It made communication harder. But it didn't touch the core of who I am. I am George Richardson. I am 77 years old. I am a stroke survivor. I'm an architect. I'm an advocate. And I'm living proof that your voice is not your only power. When Marcus and Angela assumed my impaired speech meant an impaired mind, they made a fatal mistake. They thought silence meant helplessness. They thought inability to speak meant inability to act. They learned otherwise. And so did I. I learned that I was stronger than I thought, that adaptation is possible, that there are many ways to communicate, to gather evidence, to fight back. That intelligence doesn't require perfect speech, that dignity doesn't require a perfect body. Every day I receive emails from other stroke survivors telling me my story inspired them, that they're fighting back against exploitation, that they're refusing to be seen as helpless, that they're proving their minds work even when their bodies struggle. That's my legacy. Not the money I recovered, not the convictions I helped achieve, but the message I've spread. You are not helpless. You are not incompetent. Your physical limitations do not define your worth or your power. Marcus and Angela will spend the rest of their lives in prison. I will spend the rest of mine living freely, advocating loudly, and proving that survivors are stronger than those who try to victimize them. Did you like this story? Let me know in the comments where you're listening from.